Okay, I've only been asked 15,000 times to do this, so I guess today we'll muddle through what might have happened if Qibli accepted Darkstalker's offer. I've been avoiding this one for a while because I think animus magic is a total plot killer, see previous videos complaining about it, and because I've already done a what if video about animus magic with Sunny. So I've tried to keep this from feeling samey, and let me tell you, it was really hard. Because power corrupts, and I kept wanting to take this story in a direction similar to the Sunny Animus video. Fun fact, this is the only what if on this channel that I have had to completely rewrite, because even after fighting it for like 3 hours, I decided it sucked and I started over. And then I took a month-long break. But now I'm back, and I had a lovely break. I went camping, I looked at my dog's baby pictures, I did lots of behind-the-scenes work that keeps my channel and store running smoothly. Sort of smoothly. Well, it keeps things running anyways. I hope you guys had as good of a January as I did, but now, without further ado, let's get into that what if. When Darkstalker made his offer, Qibli's first thought was no. But, almost against his will, he began considering it. He couldn't help but wonder just what he could do with animus magic. He could save his friends. He could keep Darkstalker from taking revenge on the Icewings. Hadn't he wondered what he would do with magic? Hadn't he wished he'd had animus powers instead of Turtle or an enemy? Surely, not harming Darkstalker couldn't be the only stipulation. There would be a hidden component of that spell. But maybe Qibli could negotiate. He'd been thinking in silence for long minutes. But finally, he said, Darkstalker, if I accept, I have conditions. The huge Nightwing shifted back a little, looking suspicious. What kind of conditions? He asked. I'll need something to write on, Qibli said, heart-pounding. He wasn't agreeing. He was negotiating. There was a difference. Darkstalker clawed up a talon full of dirt and blew on it, dark eyes never leaving Qibli. A scroll and a stick of charcoal appeared, and he handed them to Qibli, who began jotting down his conditions. After several minutes of writing, scratching out, and amending his terms, he handed the scroll to Darkstalker. Let's see, Darkstalker mused, reading down the list. It looked comically small in his huge talons. No spells to alter your mind, emotions, or personality? I would never do that, Qibli. You wound me. Qibli raised one eyebrow and didn't bother responding to that. Darkstalker coughed. After this spell, I won't be able to cast any spells on you, and you'll never be able to cast any spells on me. That's fair, I suppose. No harming dragons from other tribes. He jerked his talon to the side so he could glare at Qibli. And you have to dispel the illness you put on the Icewings, Qibli said, eyes narrowed. Darkstalker hissed. No, he said. There is nobody alive today who's harmed you, Qibli said staunchly. The only dragon harming others here is you, Darkstalker. They deserve it, he hissed angrily. They killed my mother. Qibli swallowed. This wasn't in the plan, but... No, he said. They didn't. Foeslayer is still alive, and it was an Icewing who saved her from her prison, a friend of mine. Darkstalker froze, eyes wide as he stared at Qibli. Really? He whispered. Really, Qibli said. There's no reason to keep hurting each other. The Icewings and the Nightwings are both ready to let this war go. Are you? Darkstalker, for the first time in this conversation, looked visibly conflicted. I know you want to cast some kind of loyalty spell on me, Qibli continued, picking up steam as he felt his way through this argument. I won't let you do that. I could just rip off that earring and enchant you anyways, Darkstalker pointed out sourly. Maybe. Qibli shrugged, forcing himself not to shift away. But wouldn't it be nice to have a friend? Someone who spends time with you because they want to, not because you've enchanted them to? Wouldn't it be nice, when I take you to see Foeslayer in a minute, for her to have something to be proud about instead of upset? That might have been a low blow, but Qibli wasn't ashamed of it. Darkstalker narrowed his eyes. You can't promise to be someone's friend, he said. I've had friends before. I'm very personable, Qibli assured him. And the only way to get friends is to be the kind of dragon they would like. A good way to start that process is by, say, not killing an entire dragon tribe and not enchanting people's minds. Darkstalker shifted again. We'll write the spell on the paper, Qibli said, feeling his boldness grow. He could do so much good. He was going to gain power and keep Darkstalker from doing anything else too. So there's nothing in it either of us don't want. That was laughable. Darkstalker had nothing to fear from Qibli. But he said it anyway. And I'll go back to the Kingdom of Night with you and Foeslayer, and we can work on rebuilding the Nightwing tribe. You'll have more than enough work cut out for you if you want to do that, without worrying about other tribes. Ignoring other tribes gets you attacked, Darkstalker scoffed. So, I didn't say ignore them. I said no attacking first. If they don't bother you, then you don't bother them. You can enchant your kingdom to be protected, you know. Darkstalker looked at him hard. Fine, he said, reluctantly. Your terms are intriguing and acceptable. Qibli felt a tremble of relief at that. The two of them leaned over the scroll together, wording their spell until both were happy with it. And then, finally, Darkstalker read from the paper, word for word, and cast the spell that would turn Qibli into an animus. That was when Kinkajou and Moon burst from their hiding place. Moon and Kinkajou were furious with Qibli for not following through on their plan and betraying them as they saw it. They'd been way madder than Qibli had expected. But done was done, and he was sure they'd see his side of it soon, when Darkstalker was safely in the Night Kingdom and leaving the other tribes in peace. He and Darkstalker left with Foeslayer that very night, heading for the old Night Kingdom. Qibli didn't know if it was the offer of a friend who wasn't slave to a spell, or the hope of seeing his mother again, or a mix of both, but Darkstalker returned his kingdom with a minimum of grouching and bad ideas. Qibli himself was feeling hurt. Yes, he'd changed the plan, but he hadn't betrayed his friends. He was doing this so that he could do good. And it worked. Darkstalker had laid off on the murder and mind control. But none of his winglet had spoken to him since he'd accepted the Animus offer, and it hadn't looked like that was going to change. Moon hadn't even wanted to come to the Night Kingdom with him and Darkstalker. Qibli had begged her to, but she'd refused, preferring to stay at Jade Mountain Academy. His friends, they'd forgive him eventually, Qibli hoped. In the meantime, he had plenty of work to distract himself with. Darkstalker was a lot to handle. He was egotistical, he tended to jump to extremes, and he didn't really understand the concept of empathy. But Qibli kept on him about the value of friendships that didn't rely on magic, and it seemed he'd had a few bad experiences trying some extreme solutions already, so Darkstalker seemed willing to actually try. Of course, it helped that he couldn't enchant Qibli, and Foeslayer had sternly warned him he'd better never enchant her. Qibli had been surprised to learn that apparently the great and mighty Darkstalker was still pretty hesitant to disobey his mom. But Qibli and Foeslayer tag-teamed him, trying to help him stretch long unused emotional muscles, like kindness and patience. It was kind of like babysitting a dragonette, one who was 10 times Qibli's size and in possession of godly powers. Over time, Qibli caught himself actually liking Darkstalker. Sometimes he could be funny, and he was smart. Few dragons could match Qibli on an intellectual level, and he'd never realized how nice it would be to find someone who did. Plus, they had plenty of work to get to. Resurrecting the Night Kingdom required a lot of magic, a lot of work, and a lot of hard thinking. They spent months working together, both on the kingdom and their relationship, and eventually Qibli realized something. He actually liked Darkstalker. Like, as a friend, not even as an ally or a necessary evil. He liked Darkstalker for himself, even if he still had moments every now and again. He was a guy with way too much power and not enough good influence in his life. Qibli couldn't entirely blame him for his feelings, even if he could for his actions. Despite those new feelings, Qibli wasn't that surprised when he realized that not everyone felt the same way about the first Nightwing King. But he was surprised when he caught his old friends sneaking into the Night Palace. "What are you doing here?" he asked in shock, keeping his voice down. Because if his friends had been here to visit, they wouldn't have snuck in during the night using an invisibility charm. which he probably wouldn't have even known about if Qibli hadn't been paranoid enough to set magic alarms around the palace for non-Nightwings. Because the last thing he needed was Darkstalker almost killing a merchant who'd gotten lost. Again. Winter and Moon, standing next to each other at the back of the group, were glaring harshly at him. Turtle looked panicked, Kinkajou had a look like she was about to fight him, and Pero was nowhere to be found, which, good call, he thought absently, because she's not super stealthy. Winter kicked Turtle's ankle. The Seawing jolted and muttered something under his breath. Qibli raised an eyebrow. "Your magic won't work on me," he said softly. "And you know it won't work on Darkstalker either. What are you doing here?" "What you didn't," Winter snapped. Okay, he looked really mad. Qibli huffed, old hurts pricking at him. "I saw a better option," he said, and it sounded lame even as he said it. "Look, he hasn't hurt anyone since then, has he? It worked," Qibli defended himself. "Well, he still could," Winter hissed angrily. "How do you know he hasn't magicked you not to notice?" "He can't," Qibli said. "It's part of our deal." "Like he's incapable of lying," Moon bit out. "Trust me, I know how manipulative he can be." "Moon," Qibli started, but he trailed off. What could he say? Winter snarled at him, spines flaring protectively. "Don't talk to her," he said grumpily. Qibli looked between the two of them rapidly. "Oh." "What are you doing here?" he said again, begging with his tone for them to answer. They traded glances. "We're here to make sure Darkstalker isn't a threat," Turtle said gently. "How?" Qibli barked incredulously. "You're in the same boat we were a year ago," he said. "And anyways, Darkstalker, he's changing. He's getting better," Qibli said. "So he's forgiven for everything he's done?" Winter demanded. "Just because he's cleaned up his act enough to fool you?" "Hey," Qibli yelped. You don't know what we've been doing here for the Nightwings. And for all of Pyria, honestly, because it keeps Darkstalker occupied. Which, by the way, you could have easily found out by visiting me at any time during the last year," he said. And oops, a little more hurt than he intended leaked into that statement. Turtle looked a little guilty, but the other three continued to glare at him. "What happens when he isn't occupied anymore?" Moon asked softly. "Qibli, he's immortal, remember? You won't be around to distract him forever." Qibli knew that. He was working on it. "We're working on it," he said, shuffling his talons. He and Foeslayer were. Winter snarled. "I've heard enough," he snapped. "We can just knock you out," he threatened. "Your magic won't work on us either, and we outnumber you." Qibli bristled. "So you can stomp into the palace and make Darkstalker mad enough to somehow get around the bounds of our deal?" "No way," he said. "The spell says Darkstalker can't attack first. If you go and start trouble, he's allowed to fight back," he hissed. "Don't open that door." "How do you know he's even bound by that spell?" Moon asked. "He cast it. I saw it," she reminded him, like Qibli could ever forget. "I know," he said softly. "I've tested it with other spells. Turtle, you can test it too. Enchant a scroll to tell you the answer. Enchant a pear to turn pink if I'm lying. Enchant a stone to vibrate when Darkstalker lies to you. Try anything I've tried during the year I've spent alone with him." Wow, okay. Maybe Qibli was a little more bitter than he thought? Turtle was blinking at him. "I didn't think about any of that," he said. Qibli just barely held back from rolling his eyes. Wasn't that the entire reason he'd been tempted to accept animus magic in the first place? "Test me," he said. "Enchant something to tell you if I'm lying." Turtle did, and it didn't. He tried again. That spell proved Qibli's honesty too. "So you want us to what, just turn around and leave?" Winter hissed. "Just let Darkstalker get a crown, a kingdom, his freedom, after everything he's done?" "Yes," Qibli said sharply. "He's too powerful to stop, Winter. He can't be forced, he has to want it." He caught the glance Kinkajou sent Winter. He suddenly knew what their plan was. "Guys," Qibli said in dawning horror, "please tell me you did not sneak into the Night Kingdom to attack the king, who's 2,000 years old and an invincible animus, to attempt to enact a plan that I helped come up with over a year ago?" Kinkajou glared at him. I helped come up with it too, she snapped. Well, did you warn him about it? Moon asked solemnly, and Qibli bit his tongue. He hadn't. Something in him had warned him not to give up his only possible idea if Darkstalker ever did somehow get around their deal. But what could he say? If he said no, his friends might try to knock him out, invade Darkstalker's chambers, and enchant him with those old scroll scraps. And they might die in the process, or start a new war, both things Qibli had spent the last year working to avoid. But if he said yes, that might be burning his last chance to ever earn their forgiveness. Qibli looked around at their faces, trying to memorize them. Winter's sharp, elegant features, Moon's smooth, soft scales, mottled with subtle hints of blue-green. Turtle's kind face, even in their current situation. Kinkajou's fierce determination. He couldn't let them do this, even if it meant sacrificing his own chances at forgiveness. Yes, he lied. I told him. He's protected himself. It won't work now. We tested it. Winter's face twisted in anger. Even Turtle looked mad now, which was rare. Moon's face was the worst, though. She looked for a moment like she'd had hope in him. Now. Qibli's throat felt dry, like he'd breathed flames too long, too hot. You should go, he said finally, managing to keep the tremble out of his voice. Before Darkstalker realizes you're here. For a horrible moment, he was a little worried Kinkajou or Winter might attack him anyways. They both looked so furious. But after that heart-stopping pause, they turned and walked back the way they'd come. Qibli was left standing alone in a dark hallway. His friends, they might never forgive him for that lie. He could only hope that years coming would prove him right, prove that he'd been right to trust Darkstalker, and accept his offer. Okay, so this one was really tough to write. Like, you have no idea how much snack food I churned through over the 6 hours it took to write this. And there are several reasons for that, but it's mostly Qibli's fault. For one, he's a hopeless optimist. What does that mean? Well, he went into that talk with Darkstalker with a plan, or at least a sort of plan. For Qibli, I don't think he would just abandon that plan and his friends and accept Darkstalker's offer. Even if he really wanted to be an animist that bad, he'd try to convince Turtle or Anemone first. I think that he would never accept Darkstalker's offer for any reason. So that means this is already tough to write because the first step is to go completely out of character for Qibli. Second, he's not dumb enough to fall for Darkstalker's offer, and he's too loyal to his friends Moon and Thorn. I 100% would never believe Qibli would ever fall for that trick or say yes even if it wasn't a trick. So it was really hard to write this because it's just not in character at any point. So no matter what I did, I felt like it was weird. But what do y'all think? Is there any way Qibli could fall for Darkstalker's trick or accept his offer in good faith? What do you think his friends' reactions would be? If you enjoyed this What If, I have lots of others you can check out, most of them a lot more in character than this one. You can also check out the links in the description and the pinned comment, which will take you to my Redbubble store, my actual store, my DeviantArt, and my Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, did you know my patrons got an extended version of this video? Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Remember to leave a like or comment if you had a good time, and y'all have a blessed day. Surely not harming Darkstalker, harming Darkstalker head, Darkstalker.